everyone. Thank you so much for attending today. My name is Amy Bucher. I am the Vice President of Behavior Change Design at Mad Pow, and this is a virtual HIMSS 20 session. As you probably know, if you're here on this webinar, HIMSS was canceled this year as a result of the coronavirus, and I'm really grateful to the Center for Health Experience Design to have given me this opportunity to share the presentation that I'd prepared. I also was able to present as part of the full panel that we had planned yesterday, thanks to Carium, and there is a recording available of that session if you're interested in the other two panelists and some of the discussions. So I have tweeted about that. I can share that link again following this presentation. So what I will do today is I'm going to share what I had prepared for HIMSS for the Consumerization of Health Forum around the psychology of trustworthy digital health experiences. There will be some time for Q&A at the end, and my colleague Catherine Houtanen from the Center of Health Experience Design will facilitate that, so you'll hear her voice after I'm done presenting. So, as I mentioned, my presentation focuses on the psychology of trustworthy digital health experiences. And building a trustworthy experience is incredibly important when you think about digital health. These are our three high bucket reasons why. The first is that people don't start using digital solutions that they don't trust. And that's especially true in digital health because they're often asked to provide PHI, or they may be asked to grant access to their personal health data in some other way. And we all know that that data has high potential to be misused or used against us. So really that trustworthiness is incredibly important when it comes to getting people to start with the technology. And then of course there's continued use. So people who feel like their data isn't protected, people who opt into using something but then feel that it doesn't live up to the promise, they will stop using it, and they will stop using it with a bad taste in their mouths, which is especially important because of the third reason, which is that oftentimes in digital health, we don't need people to use a particular product forever. They may graduate from using it. They may grow the skills that they need to be able to manage whatever it is they're focusing on without the use of the technology any longer. And that's great. That's actually part of our goal in building these technologies. But what we do want is for them to recommend to other people for whom it might be appropriate that this is a good solution for them, and also to return to us if their needs change and they need to come back and engage in that same type of behavior change again in the future. So it's incredibly important that we provide them with that trust and honor that trust so that they leave the experience as a recommender and as someone who's willing to come back in the future. There are really two components to building trust. The first is in how you design a solution, and the second is how you communicate within the solution about your trustworthiness. So I'm just going to very briefly, in terms of the designing for it, say that you should just do it. And these are things like data security, making sure that people's data is protected and stored in a secure manner. It means not making people's personal data visible to people who shouldn't be able to see it. I also strongly feel it means not making agreements with third parties to share pieces of the data, even if that's in accordance with the terms of service and what users have agreed to, if that might in some way put people at risk. But this is not really the focus. I consider this a much more health IT focused question, but really it's vital to making sure that ultimately whatever digital health solution you build gains and keeps the trust of the people using it. What I do want to focus on are how you can communicate within your solution that you are trustworthy. And I've boiled it down to 5 ways that you can communicate this. And so these are them. I'll present the list again at the end, and I'll also go through some detailed examples of each, but they are to establish credibility, provide details to your users about how you will live into the trust, offering clear and immediate value to users as soon as they start their experience within your digital app, incorporating a warm tone and personalization into the product, and then letting people make meaningful choices about their experience wherever possible. So the first principle here is establishing credibility. And actually with digital health, we're in a really good position to be able to do this because so many digital health solutions are built on clinical protocols or strong evidence bases. And so the first sort of sub-tip here is to share that information with your users. Let them know about the clinical evidence that's informing your solution. People feel good if they know that they're using a product that is built on an evidence base. And that's regardless of the level of scientific sophistication they have. Some people may want to know all of the details about what went into the solution. Others may not care about that, or they may not have the educational background to fully appreciate it, but they still appreciate knowing that it's there. So let people know about the clinical foundations of your product. Let them know too who's behind the scenes. Pull back the curtain and tell them about the experts who created that solution. So you can see here in the screenshot, this is from a program called Curable. And one of the cool things about this product is that they have experts, physicians, scientists as part of their staff, but they also involve patients who have experienced pain. That's for chronic pain sufferers. So they have patients who experience chronic pain who also contribute to the development of that solution. And letting people know about the experts behind the scenes, again, fosters that sense of trust. And then the third tip here is to let people know about the trust of others. So a common thing you might see is a celebrity endorsement, something like Oprah using Weight Watchers, now WW. But it doesn't have to be a celebrity. It could just be other regular people who have been successful and had a good experience using your product. Our brains are wired to understand stories and to really grab information that is in story format and is about other people. We're built to be empathy creatures. And so if you can share stories from other users, that very rapidly can help build trust in your product. The second tip here is to provide details about how you will live into that trust. And the Legalese Matters. So even though people typically don't really read this. So what I have here, it's a screenshot from an app called Oshi. It's to help people who have irritable bowel disorder. And I like what they've done with the Legalese here, because if people do need the answer to a question, they're able to find it because of the way the information is organized. Now, we know most people are not going to read through all of this text, and many people probably won't look at any of this text, but if they need it, it is parsable by them, and that's not something that a lot of companies do. For example here, this is from Apple, and they're notorious. This is 256 pages of a user agreement, and when you first start to use an Apple product, they ask you to click a box that certifies that you have read this. And then what that basically grants them the right to do is if there's something buried in these 256 pages about the way that they use your data or what they do with a third-party partner, you've consented to that, and chances are you have not done it in an informed manner. That is not a great way to earn somebody's trust. And you compare it with something like Pinterest here, which is not a health app, I know, but the panel, it was focused on consumerization of digital health. So it's really also what can we learn from the consumer world beyond health. I think Pinterest does a particularly lovely job of their terms of service. They break it out into topics, and I've highlighted here the more simply put. They also paraphrase the information at the end of each section in a way that is plain language, that's comprehensible, even to people who don't have a legal background, don't have a technical background. I think it's a really wonderful way to show that they respect users. And as one of my co-panelists yesterday put it, it also says, you know, the way that you do these details, it says something about the way that you approach the entire design of the product. People are attuned to these sorts of cues about whether or not they can trust you. You can also do an if this, then that. And I put this together several weeks ago. I probably would not have used the Talkspace example because there's actually just been some news that's come out that some of these apps, and I can't remember if Talkspace specifically was among them, are sharing some data about their users with Facebook and other third parties. And I have real discomfort with that. I think that gets right at the heart of why trust is important, and it is a violation of the user's trust. But what I do like about these examples nonetheless is they provide clear information about what users are signing up for. So with the case of Talkspace here, it does let people know that they can use whatever modality of communication they're most comfortable with. And because that can be a barrier to people using a behavioral health app, it's good that they have that information up front. And similarly, this other one is from Strava, and they ask for your location data, but they tell you why. I know many of you probably have the same experience I do, where you download a new app and it wants access to several different parts of your phone's functioning. You know, it wants to know location data or access to your contacts, and it's not clear why they might need that or how they might use that, which makes it difficult to trust them out of the gate. It's much easier if you know why they're doing that, and I also really love that they ask, is that okay with you? So it's a little bit more personal, a little bit more like a conversation. Offering clear and immediate value. As soon as somebody starts using your digital product, you have an opportunity to show them that they've made the right choice, and that for the trust they're putting in you, of providing you with their data and access to their device and access to their information, you are going to provide something back to them in terms of helping them get closer to a goal that they might have. So one way you can do that is by equipping users to leave the experience smarter. TurboTax is a gold standard for this. Most people who have prepared their taxes with TurboTax know how easy it is to get the information you need right in line with the experience. So right at the side of the screen, it will say, based on what you're doing right now, here's the information you need to help. And that's really a great way to provide value right out of the gate. This is a healthcare-related example that I recently found that I think really builds on that TurboTax model in a nice way. This is a program called Rubric, and it is a decision-making tool that people who are caregivers can use to understand what options they might have to help them to care for their loved ones. And what I like about it is you can see here it has 23 questions in the beginning flow. But for each question, they actually give you some context for why they're asking that question to help you understand the way that you might want to answer it. So this one, is he still driving? And letting you know that, living alone after you stop driving can lead to isolation. It gives you a little bit of a preview of where this questioning might go, and it also helps you understand how you might want to answer it. You can also show users you're listening. That's another quick way to show value. So the example here on the left is from a product called Cake. And Cake helps people with end-of-life planning, which is a really difficult issue to discuss. It's very emotional for a lot of people. It's difficult to confront your own mortality, but it's also very important to do in order to take care of your loved ones and make sure that they're taken care of after you're gone. And one of the really nice things about Cake, they make sure to take the things that you've told them into account right from the beginning so that you really feel like you're being respected as a person, your opinions, your desires matter. And similarly here, this is a chat bot from a group called 7 Cups, and it asks you up front, what do you want to be called? And it immediately starts to call you by your preferred name. And then it asks you again, what's your next preference? Would you prefer to continue to chat with the chatbot, or do you want us to get a real person online to help you? So it's right away showing a real respect for what I as a user might want and need from their service. Next is incorporating warm tone and personalization into your product, and this is why it's so important to work with your content colleagues as well, because their inputs into the design go a long way towards helping your users feel that sense of trust, that relationship with the product. Designing for acceptance, so letting people know that whatever it is they want, whatever their preferences are, that's okay with you. You respect that, and you still think highly of them as a result. So we have a decision-making tool here from ME Solutions, which was acquired by Wolters Kluwer. But it's basically letting the person know that when it comes to making treatment decisions, we are going to consider what you value, what your schedule looks like. We're not just going to recommend something to you because we think it's the right thing. We're going to make sure it works for you too. And then on the right is a product that I really love called Wobot. It's a chat bot that is designed to help people with behavioral health issues, so anxiety, depression, and it was actually built with adolescent men in mind because they frequently don't seek that type of help when they need it, may not even recognize that they have a place for it in their lives. And you can see there, this is a real chat I had with it. It asked me what I was doing, and I said I just finished dinner, and it sent me this really cute and funny image of a dog eating a piece of pizza. And it was a really great way for me to feel like I was engaging in a real conversation with this product. And it obviously listened to what I said. It drew some meaning out of that, and it made me feel like I could continue to have this safe conversation about a difficult topic. So I thought it was a great example of really building that warmth and friendliness into the product experience. And then also designing for individuals. So this is, again, it gets at that same idea of offering immediate value, but understanding who your users are and reflecting that back, because that's what real people do in conversation with each other. That's how we build trust in each other as people, as friends. And you can do that with your product as well. So whether it's something like Spotify, where you put together music mixes that reflect the type of songs that your users like to listen to, let them know, I see you, I understand you. Or if it's something here on the right, like DietBet, where you understand right off the bat, is this a person who enjoys hooking up other devices to this app? Or is this someone who's relatively low tech and is going to be turned off if I keep asking them to connect their Fitbit or their Garmin or whatever other device they might use? And then respecting what they told me in the way that the experience unfolds thereafter. Lastly is letting users make meaningful choices about their experience. And a really important thing here is to understand what is meant by a meaningful choice as opposed to just a choice. So too many choices can be stressful for people. Think about Netflix. I personally feel very stressed out by my Netflix. It has so many options that I sometimes don't know where to begin, and I end up not watching anything, We don't want to do that to our users, but we do sometimes. So there are two examples. The one on the left is a product that I actually worked on, so I'm dumping on myself here. And I do love this feature, but it's not really meaningful. You can select your own background. So I always selected the cityscape whenever I was doing user testing on the product, or as we were going through the build. But you could choose puppies or kittens or nature scenes. It's nice. It's not super meaningful. And then on the right here, you have MetaSafe. And if you upgrade to premium, you can change the color of your background, which again, I mean, maybe you care about that, probably you don't, and it certainly isn't going to add any value to your medication adherence or your pharmacy management. So avoid designating cosmetic choices only. That's not typically meaningful. And if eliminating a choice point, this is your rule of thumb. How do I know if this is meaningful? If you didn't let people have that choice, would it really change the experience for them? If the answer is no, that's probably not a meaningful choice. Contrast with something like this. So this is an investment app, and the images for Clean and Green and Do the Right Thing are truly missing from their site. So that's not an error in the screenshot here. But it's designed to help novice investors figure out how to put their money into different funds. And because novice investors typically can't just go through a list of funds and figure out from the data which ones might be best, what it does is it bundles them in terms of causes that people might care about. So if you are somebody who deeply cares about sustainability in the environment, you have a few choices here, and you can even go a little bit deeper and say, I specifically care about making sure that water sources are kept clean and made available to people who need drinking water. It's a really nice way to help people do something that feels meaningful with their money. This is another example from a quitting smoking app, and one of the first things that it does is it asks people to talk about their motivations for wanting to quit smoking. So the screen on the left is the one that asks you to generate those. On the right, these are ones that I put in, and what it does is it will let you then remind yourself. So you can set up reminders to reflect your own words back at yourself and say, you know what, I really do want this cigarette right now, but I also really want to be able to do that 5K in 2 months with my kids, and so I'm not going to do it. This is from Noom, which I think a lot of people are getting familiar with, but it's a weight management app. And they have a very nice flow in the beginning where they ask people to describe what their goals are, and then they help them probe even more deeply on that so they can really get down to their ultimate why that they're undertaking this journey. And that is, again, it's a really nice way to connect with a meaningful choice for people. And when you know somebody cares about your personal reasons for doing something, that goes a long way toward trust. So the bottom line here, trust goes from respect. I've used the word respect several times in this presentation, and it's not by accident. As designers, we need to have respect for our users, and we need to build our products in a way that users understand that we have that respect. The products live into the respect that we had as we were working on building this thing. And that respect includes people's data and privacy. It includes their preferences. It includes their time, making things easy for people, making sure that we're not asking them to do something that benefits us much more than it benefits them. And respecting their goals, understanding that they have come to use this product for reasons that are personal to them. And if we can live into those reasons with them, they are more likely to stick with it and to enjoy their experience. So as you're designing, of course, think about how you're actually securing people's trust. Make sure that you are protecting data, you're doing all the right things in terms of privacy. But then also think about, how do you communicate it? How do you let your user know at each turn that you have that respect for them? So that is the end. Hopefully we have some questions, and I'm really happy to chat about this. This is a topic I feel really passionately about, so I'm really excited to hear what people have to say on it.
Thanks, Amy. As Amy mentioned earlier, my name is Catherine Houtman. I run the Center for Health Experience Design, and I will be facilitating the question portion. So if you have any questions, all you need to do is on the GoToWebinar control panel, there is a question box there. So if you want to get clarification or want to ask a provocative question, we would love to have a chat here about trust and digital health. So nothing's coming in at the moment, Amy, but I thought that was really interesting and a lot of things I didn't learn. I like the fact that when you talk about how if the choice doesn't change anything, don't include it. And oh, we've got a question. Okay. No, it's a statement. So Mark says, design quality affects trust a lot, exclamation point.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And I think that actually gets into all aspects of the user experience too. So I used, and actually, I apologize, I forgot the name of this app. I think it might just be called Quit, but the design of it is actually not particularly sophisticated. And when I was going through and testing it, I thought it did some really nice things in terms of asking these meaningful questions. But I personally felt that sort of like, is this a good app to use given that the design seems kind of amateur? So I think that we do look for those sorts of design considerations as signals for whether or not the overall app is one that we can trust.
Mhm. I've got a question here from Patricia, and she asks, in the app for the teenage boys with behavioral health, can you share again what that goal, what the goal of the app is?
Yeah, so this app is called Wobot, and I actually interviewed the founder of Wobot, Allison Darcy, in my book Engaged, which just came out last week. And so I got a chance to spend quite a bit of time talking with her one on one about the inspiration for building it and the intention of doing it. It is intended to help people get help for behavioral health issues, so especially anxiety and depression. It's basically a trusted source that you can talk to about your mood, and it also assesses your symptomatology along the way. So they're interested in reducing people's PHQ-9 scores. It's a clinical measure of depression. But when I was talking to Allison, one of the things that I was most fascinated about is their target user is that adolescent male, because when they were doing their initial research, they found most women have someone else in their life that they talk to when they feel low or when they want to work through something that's bothering them. And a lot of men don't have that person. So what they're doing is they're not talking about it with anybody. So the whole idea behind Wobot, it's artificial intelligence driven. It's, there's no real person behind the scenes here, but they are trying to appeal to that audience and make it feel really safe to talk about these emotional issues that their users may not have a lot of practice talking about, and they may feel some stigma or some shame talking about. And so they've put a lot of thought into making it humorous, but also still being respectful of the intense emotions that people might be feeling. And I think they've done a really beautiful job of it.
Great. Well, now we're getting a ton of questions. So here's one in from Jennifer. So thank you for drawing attention to the importance of plain language in consumer communications.
You're welcome. Yeah.
I mean, it's
Is
a
there a
statement.
question?
No, that's the statement. But I also wanted to tell you, Jennifer, yesterday we actually did a webinar with our content strategy VP on plain language. Healthy language is plain language. And I can send the recording in our thank you note. I'll be emailing everyone after this webinar with the recording, a link to the slides, and some other resources that we might find useful. So that might be worth your time. She really talks very specifically about how to evaluate how plain language is and how to quantify the level that you're writing content at.
Yeah.
Let me see.
And I just wanted to add too, I feel really passionately about that issue as well. I've paid a lot of attention over the years to companies like Facebook that have access to an enormous amount of people's data. And one argument that I've seen several times from people associated with Facebook and other companies as well, users have the option to go in and comb through their privacy settings and make some of these choices. And I don't consider that a valid defense, because I think it's asking far too much of most people to do that. It's asking far too much of me. I'm a highly educated person who understands technology, and I don't have the time or the attention to go in and check my app settings on every app I use on a regular basis in case they've changed something. I think it's incredibly important that we tell people in plain language what we're doing with them and for them and with their data, and make those choices really upfront for them, as opposed to relying on them to go dig through legalese and terminology that they may not really understand. So I think plain language is incredibly important, and I consider it a moral, ethical thing that we need to do.
Mm-hmm. We also have a question from Trina. Hi, Trina. She asks, what are your thoughts on ensuring you are building trust throughout the entire user experience, not just at onboarding? Do you have a sense of how trust flows throughout an end-to-end user experience?
Yeah, I do. So I put a whole chapter on trust in my book because, again, I consider it so important. And I'll like a little behind the scenes. With my editor, as we were working on the book, that was one chapter that she wasn't convinced at the outset was necessary, because a lot of the things I talk about, they are repetitive of techniques that I talk about in terms of other things, like building a relationship with somebody. But I think that we do need to consider trust as its own separate issue that sits above everything else we're trying to do within an experience. So I think that when we're thinking about developing something before the product exists, one of the big things we need to do for that trust is to co-design, to include the people who will ultimately use the product in the research. We have to be talking to them. We have to be doing that primary research with them up front and making sure that it's obvious to people that we have heard their voices in the way that we've built a product. And that doesn't, obviously we can't include every single user in that, but at least to have representatives of the user group and involve their community. And I think at the very end of the experience, a thing that we tend to do poorly as a digital health industry, but is really important, is to make it easy for people to say goodbye. I really like the idea of people graduating from a digital health app because they have gained the skills that they need to continue with whatever their new behavior is, whatever their new normal is, without us holding their hands. And I think a lot of the way the business around digital health is set up, it's really hard for us to let them go, because losing a user is seen as a sign of failure instead of a sign of success. But I would really like to see more attention on how do we do that graceful goodbye? How do we move the user on to the next phase of their life, so that, again, they can recommend us to others who need us, they can come back if they ever do feel that need again, they can move on to the next thing. But I think that's a really important way that we can be respectful of them and have that trust.
Great. And we have a question from Candace. Are there specific ways we might focus on trust during user testing and research?
Yeah, I think one thing I've found, so I do a lot of research where I talk to people about topics that they're reluctant to share, and they've agreed to participate in the research, so they're not completely unwilling. But we just did research about I've done research about construction safety, I've done research on behavioral health, and it's really difficult for people to share some of these things if they either have a sense of stigmatization or it's something they consider really private, or with construction safety, if they know they've done things that maybe are against the rules. And so one thing I've found helps build trust just in that research moment, in the hour-long interview or 90-minute interview, is to ask them to tell you stories about other people. So this was particularly true with construction safety. Most people, if you just ask, tell me about a time that you bent the rules to get something done more quickly. I've never done that. I wouldn't do that. I know the rules. Okay, tell me about when you see other people doing that kind of thing. Like, what are you seeing? What are they saying to you? What are your thoughts when you see it happen? And as that conversation unfolds and they can see that you're reacting, not judgmentally, that you're not, giving demerits for the fact that people maybe aren't picture perfect, I've found that often helps them trust you in the relationship, in that research interview. And by the end, they're talking much more openly about it. So that's a technique that I use a lot when I'm doing interviews about sensitive topics.
Let's see. Okay, here's one from Heather. So, do you have any more examples to show users the evidence or professional teams that involved in the development of the project?
Yes, I do. And I honest to God, I did not intend this to be like my book, but I have a couple pages of examples in the book, in that chapter about trust. I'll just say one I really like is Happify. So, another sort of mood boosting app, but they do this really nice thing where they talk about the science behind the different pieces of the product, and you can basically do a progressive click down. So if you're someone who just sort of wants to know that evidence base is there, you can see a one sentence like, we're doing this because research says it's good for these reasons. But if you're more nerdy about it, you can click in and you basically get into this mini research paper that has all of the citations in it. So they do a very nice job of making that information accessible to people all along the nerdiness spectrum. And I do have other examples though.
All right, one last question because we're almost at time. It's from Katya, and she asks, how can we measure trust in an app?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I don't know if there is a direct way to measure it. I will say two things. One is I think that people's continued use of it is one way that we can, infer trust. I would also say in yesterday's webinar with the Fuller panel, Jan Oldenburg was one of the co-presenters, had some data that she and her group have collected that specifically looks at people's attitudes towards digital health. And I'm pretty sure that she had some data in there that might help speak to that. So, we'll include the link to that recording as well with the follow-up to this. And I would recommend check out Jan's presentation. And I'm sure she would also be open to outreach. I know we've been trying to be really accessible on LinkedIn, given that HIMSS was canceled. We really wanted to try to rebuild some of that sense of community and networking that typically happens at that event. So, check out Jan's work. And thank you.
And we're at time, so I know there's a couple of unanswered questions in there. I will be sending out the recording later today, along with some links and that we've mentioned about other recordings, other upcoming events, the book, discounts for the book, etc. You can reply, our contact information will be in that email. So if you want to follow up with Amy or myself with any questions, just do it that way, or tweet at Amy at AmyBPhD. See right there on the slide. So if you don't even want to wait for the recording, you can send an email right now. But that should be out to you by the end of the day. But I wanted to say thank you so much, Amy, for your presentation. And thank you so much, everyone, for attending. I hope that was useful. And please, before you leave, if you could take the little 5-question survey that's there. We really want to get your input about what kind of webinars you'd like to have from us. That's really important for us as we build up our calendar. So thank you so much for your time. Have a great rest of your day and stay healthy.